Good day, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Lasecki, speaking to you from the Maricopa Community Colleges. It's my pleasure to introduce to you the Bridge Learning Community's webinar. Today is November 19th. It's 3 p.m. Eastern Time. This webinar will be recorded, and if you are a registered attendee, you'll automatically get a link to the recording and the slides of the webinar as well. I'm going to tell you a few things about the webinar system and the Center's Collaborative for technical assistance. Some details: you'll be in listen-only mode using your computer or phone. Please ask your questions via the question window. You'll be typing them in. We'll have several breaks. And as I mentioned, this webinar is being recorded. Today's webinar is brought to you by the Center's Collaborative for Technical Assistance. And there's additional support from the Advanced Technological Education Collaborative Impact Project. The CCTA, that's its name, is led by 5 centers. You can see their logos. The CTC Center at Collin College, SCATE in Florence, South Carolina, FLATE in Hillsborough, Florida, BioLink in San Francisco, and my own center, Maytech Networks, here in Phoenix, Arizona. Why are we doing this? What's our purpose? Well, originally there was a request from the Department of Labor that said, hey, you ATE folks have been around for a long time. What if you shared some of your learnings and best practices with others, like the Department of Labor TAA grantees? Things like success coaching, and maybe do some in-person convenings and do some webinars. So that seemed like a good idea, and we got the funding for it. Our activities are relevant not only for DOL grants and NSF grants, but any type of workforce-oriented program of any type. What are our deliverables? Well, today you're experiencing one of those deliverables. It's a topical webinar or teleconferences. And we have other online media, including videos that I mentioned and transcripts that are recorded. In addition to those deliverables, there are regional specific conferences, and there will be opportunities to identify and document best practices and doing some local regional convenings as well, all under the CCTA umbrella. So that was fun. Let's go ahead and get to the important part today, the start of our webinar. Let me tell you a little bit about our presenters. I'll first introduce Elaine Johnson, and then she'll introduce her co-panelists for today. Elaine, welcome. You're the PI and Executive Director of BioLink, headquartered at the City College of San Francisco. Elaine, I know BioLink's been around for a while. Why don't you say hello to everyone, and then go ahead with your further introductions.
Hello, everyone. I see on the attendee list that I know many of you, and some of you are new. We've been a national center, ATE National Center, since 1998. So we've had some experience, and we've worked with a lot of different projects, and we're also a part of one of the TAP grants for the Department of Labor. So we are really excited about continuing this discussion and sharing with you. We have some presenters today that are very experienced in bridge to bioscience and bridge to other programs as well. One of them is Rob Young, who is an instructor, actually an English major, and has worked with a bridge to bioscience program at City College of San Francisco. Hi, Rob.
Hi.
And then Katie Krolikowski is from Contra Costa College in San Pablo, California. She was a part of our Synergy project when we were looking at scaling up the bridge that we had developed in San Francisco. And she has taken this a step forward, adapted, adopted, and we're really excited, Katie, to have you on board today and to talk about your program. Hi.
Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be here.
Great. And Jeff Rapp is from Athens Technical College in Athens, Georgia. He's been a part of our BioLink community for a while, and he was also part of the Synergy project and took on adapting the bridge program to his school in Athens. Hi, Jeff.
Hello, Elaine.
So what we would like to do is to begin this webinar hearing from some of the students and some of the experiences that they could tell you in their own words based on what they were learning in the Bridge program. This is one that comes from City College of San Francisco and the Bridge to Biosciences.
Thank you, Elaine. Participants, I'm going to launch this video now. There may be a case, depending on your college's or your institution's firewall, where you may not see it. That's possible, but you can always review the video from this link later on. Panelists, remember to be silent during the video because if we talk, our voices will come over the video. So here we go, everyone. I'm now launching the video.
I embarked upon the journey of biotechnology by enrolling to the Bridge.
This is just a whole different learning environment than I've ever experienced before. It has me basically on the edge of my seat.
The biology being the core, I would say, of the program, but the English and the math both addressing exactly what's being taught that week in the biology class.
It teaches you the language, it teaches you the discipline, it teaches you the math.
Each of these three courses are pretty much related into completing this biotech program.
In the math class we just recently, he gave us these problems that dealt with formula, making buffers and making different things for our science lab. Even before we went into the science lab.
The English class would work on the vocabulary, mitosis, meiosis, all the different phases, help you drawing, sketching.
We had to write essays for biology.
Being able to apply it to what I'm doing makes it that much more interesting.
I'm actually only in my 7th week of this class, and I've learned more about lab equipment and what to do in a laboratory than I had in, again, previous science classes.
To me, that's a very complete process.
I can take this math and relate it to something that we're doing in the lab class, and this is what I want to do, and I'm getting it too. That's very empowering.
It's giving me the self-confidence that I really needed to kind of get to that point. It makes learning even one course more enhanced because I'm learning more through the other courses.
You want to know this. You want to be an expert.
It was easier.
I'm going to go out on a leap here, but it actually made it very fun.
And it was fun. That helps to store in your long-term memory bank.
For example, when I'm cooking at home, I can actually see how it works, how that math lesson 2 days ago makes sense. Is my brain making those connections finally? What's happened? It has to be because of the Bridge.
If there were more programs that did that, you'd have a lot more people being successful.
Retention says it all. I mean, I can hold it and I can use it every day.
Seeing the same people in every class that you took.
All registering for the classes together.
Everybody are taking the same path.
You lose a lot of the shyness.
It gives me a lot of motivation, a lot of encouragement.
I think that's a real plus for all of us as students.
Somebody to study with was something new for me. You know, that was new.
Absolutely, my math skills have improved 100-fold.
I'm like going through math like a breeze.
Very, excited to actually write the conclusion.
I'm not afraid to go out and look and ask questions and do the work.
It started me on this path of going to school. Wow, I'm actually going to school.
Every day I'm excited about going to school.
And I feel that much more empowered from it.
I feel like, yeah! You know, I got it under my belt. I turned in work early.
One of the best decisions I've ever made.
I went from, let me try it out, see where this leads to, hey, why not a master's in biotech?
The interest level has just peaked so much that I would like to continue to a 4-year college.
If it's a class, a new class, I want to be there and I want to take it.
My goal is to go as far as I can with this. And if that means, master's or PhD, that's what I'm going to do.
Continue taking the classes.
Propelled me to want to even, get an AA and a BA and, even go further. I'm going to continue until, just continue and continue and continue.
There is nothing that could compare to when that light finally comes on, that bulb comes on in the student's head, he says, I got it, and he smiles, he says, oh, that's how it works.
So we're back live, Elaine. That's very impressive comments from those people in the video.
Well, we thought that would be a good way to kick off our webinar today. And those students were a part of a learning community with different classes, but instructors working together, and we're going to hear about that. But we also then built upon that and created learning communities that shared this idea across the whole country. And this is where we think that we have some value to talk to other colleges that are interested in sharing their common concerns, deepening their knowledge and expertise about interacting on a regular basis. And that allows them to become a part of a community of practice. This depends on voluntary engagement of people and their own enthusiasm, their excitement, and then what happens is the emergence of internal leadership. So we are really pushing this whole idea of working together, and that's why we think that this idea of the National Science Foundation ATE community and the Department of Labor TAC community have something that can really be shared, and we can build upon what we've already learned. As we move on to the next slide, we want to also talk a little bit about starting a bridge program. And this is something, of course, of interest to people that are attending this webinar, many of whom either are beginning to start a bridge program, are considering it, trying to find funding for it. What are the challenges? So we know we absolutely all understand that we have students that are entering technical programs and they have many challenges, particularly in becoming successful in some of the gateway classes like chemistry and math. Also, as a community of practice, we can learn from each other. And we want to share those best practices and promote student success. And also, the funding agencies are interested in evidence of success. So what we're going to do today is to hear from several people who have experience working with bridge programs, and each presenter will have 10 minutes to describe their own experience with bridge and learning communities, and then we're going to open this up for discussion, questions from the audience. So what I am going to do now is to turn this over to Rob Young.
Thank you, Elaine. So my name is Rob Young, and I teach at City College of San Francisco, and for the past maybe 11 years I've been teaching in the Bridge to Biosciences. And my background is basic skills, so I'm an ESL instructor, and I think I come with a unique perspective of how basic skills can be integrated into a bridge program, and I can talk a lot about the necessity of that. So I want to start, I will eventually talk about 3 different programs, bridge programs that are highly successful, to talk about some models, because I think you guys out there might be considering what, I'm sorry, can you go back to my previous slide? That switched automatically. Okay. But I want to talk briefly before we start and talking about models about the big goal of completion. So this is a big picture idea here, and I don't know, you guys might know some of this, but degree attainment in other countries is outpacing the US, which is decreasing our economic growth and competitiveness. Our country has set some really high goals. We have 3 quotes on this slide here, one from Obama, one from the White House in general, one from the Gates Foundation, and all the quotes are around increasing the amount of people that graduate. And so I'm just bringing this up because there's a significant amount of emphasis on community colleges and trying to get more graduates so America can stay competitive. But as we push more people to graduate, we often push people into situations where they don't have the necessary skills, and they have a major skills gap to be able to do the work that we need them to do. Can you forward the slides? Thank you. So as I mentioned, the problem is a skills gap. As you guys all have experience with, incoming students to community college often lack the academic and basic skills to handle college level coursework. So the traditional approach is remediation. We say, okay, you want to take engineering classes, but your math and English is not good enough. Go take some math and English classes, take the developmental sequence of math and English, and come back to us when you're at this level. Well, in California, the blue statistic here on the slide, 84% of community college students are placed into remedial math or developmental math, and 72% are placed into developmental or remedial English. And so that's a huge portion, and I don't know if that's true in your state, but this is true for many states. And the question I have to ask is, does our current approach to remediation address this skills gap well? Next slide, please. And in California, at least, like I said, the blue statistic here, 84% go into remedial math, but only 10% successfully make it to college-level math. And the same is true for English or similar statistics. 72% test into remedial English, and only 25% make it to transfer-level English. So in many ways, the developmental sequence, as you know, the basic skills sequence, is hardly a success for a variety of reasons. And my big issue there, thank you for changing the slide, is that these people are lost to programs like ours that if they need higher basic skills. And so other challenges that students have are, number one, that often academic concepts are abstract in the basic skills sequence. Number two, they lack a basic skills foundation. And number three, the rationale of some assignments is unknown to students, meaning how is writing an essay going to help me in this engineering program or this science program? So one way to resolve all this is to start a bridge program. Next slide, please. So I want to talk about how bridge programs address these barriers. Number one, in bridge programs, academic support is often infused. And what we mean by that is instructional focus is not just what to do, but how to do it. So not just input and output, but process. Input would be, of course, readings or lectures, and output would be tests proving that they learned. But we focus significantly on the process. So what does it take to actually do the work? What are the steps? How do you do this? Number two, another way we address these barriers is that it's not basic skills remediation and then classes in your major. It's often basic skills remediation with content from your major at the same exact time. And I'll discuss that in more details later, and that brings up the term that gets used for number two is contextualization, right? Are we teaching math that's actually contextualized to the target major of the student? Are we teaching language skills that a scientist would use or an engineer would use? Or are we doing something that might slow a student down, which is teaching them perhaps how to write an essay that has not limited application or transferability into the target major or job of a student? Number three, a cohort model often addresses a lot of the issues we're talking about. As you saw from the video from my program, those students talked about losing shyness. They talked about going through everything together and having things be really connected and feeling comfortable talking about issues or problems and raising your hand and saying, I don't know what's going on. So a cohort model often breaks down those barriers significantly. Dual enrollment is a common recent theme that a lot of schools are working on, where high school students in their junior and senior years take classes at the community college, are enrolled in both systems, and get credit in both systems for what they achieve. So they're actually taking classes that are college-level classes. We're not changing the level of rigor and lowering it to a high school standard, but we're attempting to help them make transitions better into community college. And bridge programs help that skills gap a lot because the students are figuring out, okay, what is the level of rigor needed in college? And they're being exposed to it at an earlier age, and there's been a lot of significant data on this to prove that they're doing well by doing this. Another is professional development. So not for teachers, but for students mostly, and so a lot of bridge programs focus on career awareness and exploration, which helps keep retained students and things like that. They focus on job announcements, resumes, cover letters, interview instruction, and also another component is non-academic support. So getting students to register for financial aid, assessing disabilities, and having them know about what resources are available for them at their school. Next slide, please. So other common bridge program aspects, number one, stackable certificates. They often come in at the bridge level, and above that there might be a one-year certificate that they can stack on top, that they can understand how those certificates or pathways transfer into jobs, and they can go in and out of the system without committing to 2 years or 4 years, doing easily achievable one-year certificates that sort of stack up. Number 2, assessments are project-based. I'm sure you guys have heard of that before. And number 3, industry certification articulates with academic degrees, such as a CNA program might have a bridge program that helps students pass an industry certification. Next slide, please. So let's talk about some models. I'm going to wrap up by talking about 3 models. One is iBest, and I think a lot of people have heard about that before. It's Washington State. They've had a lot of gains that are really important. The other is LaGuardia, which is in New York, and the last is Bridge to Biotech, which is it's called Bridge to Biosciences now. So the first is iBest, and iBest stands for Integrated Basic Education and Skills Training, and the key word there is integrated. So we're looking at I'm going to go away from the numbers here for a second, just talk in general about this. You have a basic skills instructor, so English or math or ESL, in the classroom at the same time as a content instructor teaching together and team teaching. So that's number 2. There's number 3, equal overlap in instruction time, and they qualify for 1.75 reimbursements. So it's kind of unique. Some administrators have a hard time wrapping their head around how they would do that and whether it'd be helpful. But there's a couple things in 3 and 4 that can help administrators think of why this might be helpful. In this situation, content and basic skills must be presented for at least 50% of the classroom time. So it's fusing both of these together so students know, okay, if I've been given this lecture, how will the English teacher teach me how to study for the test? Or how do I compose notes? And other things that maybe the content instructor may not have time for or may not have knowledge of how to teach. And then 5, we should address some criticism. The initial criticism of iBest was that it cost a lot. You have 2 teachers in the same classroom, so it's costing more. But actually, there's a benefit, and the benefit is from decreased time spent by students in both basic skills and content classes. So they can complete programs at a quicker rate, and they don't have to take 2 sequences, their content sequence and their basic skill sequence at the same time. And then I just want to address the first point on this page briefly. It's about the tipping point research, which happened a while ago. I'm not sure you're familiar with this, but there's a lot of bridge programs that are a semester, maybe 4 months long, something like that. And Tipping Point studied all kinds of programs and determined what the effective length of a program is. And they determined they defined effective by saying, is there a significant wage gain for students in these bridge programs after the program? And they found that bridge programs that are just a semester long didn't have significant gains that justified the creation of them. And so if you're considering creating a program, oftentimes a year-long bridge program or a year-long training program, a year-long certificate, made a much more of a significant impact on a student and enabled them to have higher wages afterwards than just these short 6-week or one semester program. Next slide, please. So let's talk about LaGuardia. LaGuardia has GED bridges, and they're bridges to business careers, health careers, and professional careers. And the major aspects of their program are career-related coursework, career pathways counseling, college readiness activities, and transition support services, meaning transition into college, not necessarily out into jobs. They may have that, but we're talking about transition in. Next slide, please. LaGuardia has some great data. In their data, they found that the foundation is contextualized curriculum, meaning math and English contextualized to GED bridge for health careers or things like that. Completion rates are significantly higher. They went from 47% to 68% completion. Pass rates for the GED test were double, and higher college enrollment. So, these students are bridging into college, but they may not actually get there. They may just take the GED and find a job or do something else. But in this case, the students who took the GED bridge actually, after GED, went into college at 3 times higher. So that was really fantastic for them. And next slide, please. And I'll wrap up by talking about the Bridge to Biotech program at City College. So This is kind of a big complicated slide that takes a while to digest, but if you just look into the colored portion of it, we have a 2-semester program, and there's some yellow boxes, excuse me, in the colored portion, and those are the courses that are contextualized, that form the bridge to biotech or bridge to bioscience. And this just lists what we take first semester and second semester. And I want you to notice that if you look to the right of the colored box, there's another box at the top right, and it says general entryway for biotechnology students with some scientific background. And so they already have the skills. And what we're doing is saying, okay, normally students with limited skills do poorly in the general biology and chemistry courses. So we're going to create a bridge program that addresses their skills gap and that bridges them straight into general bio and chem so they can do upper level certificates and be on par or have similar abilities to the students who have some background or some previous college experience. So that's the structure of the program. Next slide, please. So just to talk and wrap up with some data on the program, retention is 82%. Persistence is 83% of students who graduate persist beyond bridge. They take twice as many units. They stay in school 3 times longer. I'm not saying it takes them 3 times as long. They stay in school 3 times longer, meaning they take classes and get higher degrees and get more certificates and things like that. Number 3, completion. Bridge graduates complete twice as many biotech certificates compared to a matched group. So that's the gain we're really looking for. We need to know, have we bridged that skills gap effectively, and if they're completing more certificates, then we feel like we're successful in doing that. Number 4, we wanted to know if they had success in gateway courses. So at our school, it's the chemistry and biology that they have challenges with. So of our graduates, 77% pass gateway courses, while 50% of non-bridge students fail those courses. And finally, hiring. Bridge students are 40% of them are hired by mentors after internships. So to wrap up, there's various models, and they have significantly different aspects to them, and what might work best for you might be something different depending on what the situations at your school are. And I'll turn it over to Katie, I think is next, and she's going to present on her program.
We're going to take a pause, Rob, for some questions before we go to Katie.
Okay.
I've gotten several questions. The data, I'm going to go back to your data slide because the questions are about that. To make sure we're on the same page, what do you mean by retention? How do you define retention at City College?
Yes, thank you. The number of students that remain in the class from census to the very end of the class.
Okay, and persistence?
The number of students that re-enroll the next semester.
Okay.
The percentage.
Our college here does retention slightly different and persistence identical, but I think as long as we agree on the definition that you're using, that's important. One of our attendees commented that your success number 4 is just an amazing statistic, 77 per pass, while your comparison group shows something considerably different. That's very impressive.
Thank you.
That's over what, 7 years now, Rob, is that correct?
The program has been existing for 11. This data was on 5 years worth of student data.
Interesting. I'm going to go back to the question slide for a moment. Elaine, I have one for you. I'll read it. It says, I have a manufacturing program. Do these best practices translate? What do you think, Elaine?
Well, I think that's why we're here, is that we are really interested in the transferability of the idea of students doing contextualized learning and instructors working together to support those students from different disciplines. My guess is yes, but I think that we have to try that in some of the manufacturing programs or some of the other programs and see if indeed this is going to be a good model for a lot of different students. But our own experience is that one of the problems with students is they seem to be able to do just fine in math and English, but they don't connect it with what they're doing in the career pathway and the workforce applications.
Interesting. There are several questions that I'm sure all of our panelists can imagine on funding, right? How do you fund this thing? But we're going to come back to that, Elaine and Rob, as we get towards the end. I'd like to turn back now toward our next presenter, Katie. Ask Katie, remind you to unmute your microphone. I'm going to take us forward one slide. There you go, Katie. You're on the floor.
Great, thank you, Mike. I'm Katie Krolkowski, and I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my perspective to start out my presentation to help frame a different idea compared to Rob's. I run the biotechnology program at Contra Costa College in California here, and I also teach in the regular academic program of biology. I got interested in this because I am really fascinated by the big picture of our system, both in terms of workforce training and also the overall system of education, from high school all the way through the university system. I've also been interested through my whole life in connecting multiple disciplines across a college campus. At the same time, though, I am just continually stimulated by direct interaction with the students. And the video that Elaine showed really just showcases the source of that passion in my job. I know you can probably all relate. And I'm really interested to find out how that direct classroom experience relates to that larger structure of the education and workforce development. Pictured here in the foreground is Ray, and he's just a success story I wanted to highlight to get us started. He started in the Bridge program as part of a tax-supported cohort, continued with the support of another grant from the USDA that we have, and he just completed a summer internship with a UC Berkeley professor. He's planning to transfer as a biology major, and his mentor from the summer wants to continue working with our program. So he's one true success story for both himself and for our program. So I want to start off with that good news. And my next slide, I wanted to start with some important considerations I had as we decided to create this program. So why put a Bridge program at Contra Costa College? And many aspects of community played a role. First off, City College's program was a great model. I learned of it through the collegiality of the biotech faculty in the Bay Area, and also through Elaine's fantastic work with BioLink. She talks about a community of colleagues, and it's been absolutely real in this instance. I also had strong interactions with our feeder high schools, and they particularly, they have this academy model, which have the goals of making students college and career ready, and the mechanism is through contextualized learning. The course that I developed, that I'll tell you about in a bit, was a direct response from a particular academy lead teacher. He wanted an introduction to biotech class that was taught at a level appropriate for students transitioning from high school to community college. And he also hoped for dual enrollment, as described by Rob earlier. Now, of course, as a CTE program, job readiness is an important consideration. Since this is a Bridge course, it does provide an admittedly modest credential, but students do exit with a fair number of identifiable skills. And probably the most important point to me is that we needed an entry point at our college to increase access to this really high-skill career and really challenging educational pathway of biotech, especially for our underserved students. And I think the kind of program that we've developed, and you'll hear about also from Jeff, I think it really is the key to success for our future STEM economy. A few other considerations. I wanted to make sure that there was access to multiple pathways. So besides biotech, science transfer majors would be served, and that allied health students would be served. And why was this possible? It's because we had some really clear ideas developed by thinking about City College's program, and I repeatedly shared that with my CTE dean when grant proposals came up. And on the next slide, I've got part of the structure, and then the slide after that will have the rest of the structure. Okay, so briefly, our certificate has 3 non-biotechnology classes. You see there, math, English, and counseling. And then there's the Bridge course, which I'll talk about in a second. And these all combine to make a 4-course certificate. So attainable, achievable, something that students can get a success on and then move forward. So faculty goals were actually really important in making this a success, and that drove the structure of this certificate. First, our team valued empowerment for students and wanted to encourage them to take ownership of their own education and transformation towards career readiness. And as Rob talked about, this does come from an understanding between the relationships between the required courses in the certificate, and cohort structure definitely was our solution to that. Second, we saw very little value in creating brand new courses in English, math, and counseling. So we used existing courses in our certificate. However, we did need a brand new transitional or bridge course in biotech, and we wanted to make sure it was sustainable. So it was developed to work with or without a cohort, and it is connected to a number of different curricular pathways, and I'll talk about that. Before I transition, I want to talk briefly about these non-biotech courses. They can be contextualized to biotech, but they don't have to be. But the important thing is vice versa. Biotech can be contextualized to these. And for an example, discussions with the math faculty helped me learn how to teach things like ratios and proportions in the same way that the math faculty do, and help students understand how to translate knowledge from one class to the other between math and biotech. From discussions with English faculty, I learned specific terms used in a writing and composition class, such as a process paragraph, and that was incorporated directly into the development of the biotech writing assignments. This turned out to be more of professional development than curricular development, I think, and that's professional development for us faculty participating in the program. One key point I want to emphasize is that this cross-disciplinary interaction did lead to a very structured content class in biotechnology, which I think was really good for students, knowing what is expected of them, and also will help with sustainability as other instructors take on teaching the class. So let's move to the next slide and see the actual industry-related content course. It's called Biosci 172L, and it was developed for sure to meet employer needs, but it was also developed to ensure student access. And so the big question was, how do we serve those students who come to us saying, you know, I've always been interested in science, but I really never thought I could be part of that, that community. And can't tell you everything in this short amount of time, but I did want to point out that we provide exposure to the type of thinking and work experience, or type of work that's expected in this industry, biotech, which is actually, you know, developed and run by PhD scientists. So that kind of different thinking was a big goal of this class. And also just initial training in the specific process of science and some standard techniques that improve employability. There's more to it, but that's all I can say right now. To make this class sustainable, that was a really important consideration. We did ensure, and this is down at the bottom of this slide, that the class is portable to different colleges in our system by aligning with some California course numbering system, and also that it met GE requirements for students who need to transfer. And most importantly, this new bridge class is approved as a prerequisite to advanced courses in biotechnology, biology, and other departments. The other piece about sustainability is that this 4-course certificate included some flexibility of choices. For instance, 2 different math classes could satisfy the certificate requirement, and that can increase access, which students could access the certificate, and also the number of degrees we can award at the college. So now the next slide. And this brings us back to a slightly bigger picture. So I wanted to start out by saying that there were a lot of different grants that fed into thinking about this course, and I wanted to note that we satisfied both the TACT grant that supported this work by making sure that this course helped a student build employable skills in a really short time, make them career ready, and also led to a pathway that was regionally aligned. So there are other biotech programs in our area, and this bridge program was designed with those other programs in mind. Students could stay here at our school, but could also transfer over to other biotech programs in the region. Let's see, another piece that I really wanted to talk about here is that it's important to consider a bridge program that allows students to have options. It's great to be a biotech worker, but it's also important to be able to move on to higher level transfer degrees, and I designed this so that that would happen. And a big piece of this success that we've been having is that this course is approved as a prerequisite to allied health certificate courses. So human physiology and microbiology, you see there on the right, lots of students come to us wanting to get into those courses, and giving them exposure to a different industrial field definitely increases the possibility that some of them will consider that different type of job. I'll move on to the next slide to make sure we get done in time. One slide after that, we're going to skip this one. Thanks. Just to tell you about some of our successes, and that it's a slow road. We're in the 4th cohort right now. The 1st and 2nd cohort had moderate enrollment, and about 50% passed the class, a few more than that completed. And a few of each cohort did enroll in the next level biotech courses, so persisted to the next level. The 3rd cohort was better compared to the first 2. We had better completion, slightly better pass rate, and a few more students persisted on to higher level coursework. The 4th cohort, which is going on this very fall, has similar enrollment, still about 20 students, and we're going to have 15 completers, and I'm sure 14 of those will pass. So increased completion rate from 50% to 75%. And anecdotally, I don't know for sure, but I think about 2/3 are going to move on into a STEM or allied health plans for next semester. One final note about sort of data is that just this week, both a former colleague in the English department and a colleague in the math department came up unasked, are we going to continue the bridge program after this semester? So I think that really speaks to sustainability based on collegiality between different departments in the school. So I want to finish up just by some quick acknowledgments on the last slide. And faculty across the campus were key to developing this. So there's a list of different faculty colleagues. Of course, I had lots of administrative support from CTE deans, and we've had many go through. And the final point I want to make is that I'm in a college district that really supports innovation and action. And kudos to Dr. Helen Benjamin that allows us to try new things that might really improve student access and success. And I think I'm moving us on to Jeff, and I know he also enjoys strong support across his college in Georgia. And are you ready, Jeff?
Yes, thank you, Katie. Yes, my name is Jeff Rapp. I'm the program chair for biotechnology at Athens Technical College. And I'll first start off describing our challenges before we actually knew about the Bridge program and kind of how we were dealing with those challenges, and then what we did once we learned about the Bridge program. Next slide, please. So our first challenge was that students weren't getting past this gatekeeper chemistry course due to poor math preparation. I think the next slide shows we had about 50% students not passing the gatekeeper chemistry course. So we found out from a colleague who had a similar problem, and Eric Wessinger at Central Georgia Community College. He started teaching a basic laboratory calculations class using this textbook shown in the slide by Lisa Seidman, and we pretty much follow the textbook chapter by chapter. And it is also, I teach it in the lab, so it's contextualized the way that Rob Young was describing. The Bridge program should be contextualized and have content from the major. So I actually teach it in the lab and teach the basic laboratory calculations. And the next slide shows, I believe, our results for once we started teaching the basic laboratory calculations course. Before we had about 57% passing the gatekeeper chemistry course, and then showing after we had implemented the course and students they were passing at about 71%. So getting past the gatekeeper chemistry course. And next slide, please. So then this is more recent data. So the students who took the laboratory calculations class, there were 9 that took chemistry, and then 8 of those passed chemistry. So it's looking good for that, improvement in our persistence and getting students to go from re-enroll from semester to semester. Next slide, please. Okay, the second challenge, students who were dropping out of the program generally weren't prepared for college coursework, had poor study skills and time management skills, and also were not, they had deficits in their laboratory notebook maintenance. And it was at this time that we learned, we met Elaine Johnson, and she told us about the Bridge to Biotech program in the City College of San Francisco. Next slide, please. So we already had two of the components in place for the bridge. We had our biology lab that we've been teaching several years, was very similar in content to the biology lab taught by the City College of San Francisco. And our basic lab calculations is very similar to their math class for their bridge program. And so the final piece of the puzzle was the communication for lab sciences. So this is teaching the study skills, time management skills, resume writing, keeping a lab notebook, that sort of thing. And that's what the City College of San Francisco, Rob Young in particular, helped us develop that course so we could have our full Bridge to Bioscience program and try to model it as closely as possible to City College of San Francisco because we were impressed with their retention and persistence rates. Next slide, please. So this is just to show that the three courses are required courses in the two-year associate degree program. So they're shown at the top there, the first semester. So they're required and not sort of something that the students have to take before they enter the program. They're included or integrated into the program. Next slide, please. Other advantages for having the bridge program and using the communication for lab sciences in that bridge, it forms a cohort earlier in the program. We were forming a cohort with students sort of in the second year of the program when they started one of their microbiology classes, but by doing this bridge program, it started the cohort earlier, which you heard Rob Young mention how successful that is. And it also teaches study skills that are useful for the students in other classes they might take, other classes, general education classes, for example. And then also resume, cover letters, and interviewing skills they learn in this communication for lab sciences class they can use to get part-time jobs. Even on campus, we've had some of our students get work-study positions on campus while they're still going to school here. And then finally, lab notebook maintenance skills were learned earlier in the program. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is just showing some data. Our first cohort of 8 students in the fall of 2012, and we ended up getting one of those students graduated in May, and so and received a certificate in the fall of 2014. So that's about 25%. Although the slides say retained, what I mean is persistence. So persisting semester by semester through the program, and then completion of the one student in the last spring. Next slide, please. So then these are other cohorts, again, starting in spring 2013 and then fall 2013 and following them through. And you can see although it says retention, persistence through semester by semester. And those numbers seem to be improving. Next slide, please. Administrative support. So the school in general was interested in trying to improve our persistence and completion rates. So they liked this model also and wanted to implement the study skills sort of class campus-wide. So now the school teaches this first year seminar or first semester seminar class campus-wide to all students. And that was initiated in the fall of 2014. And the textbook we use for that class is shown there. But I still use a lot of the material that we were obtained from the City College of San Francisco. Rob Young's reader, for example, is a good resource to especially include the scientific content. And I believe that's it for that part of the presentation.
Thank you, Jeff. Colleagues, I'd like to encourage you to put any questions that you might have in the question window, and we have several. Interestingly enough, 3 people asked the same question, so I'll paraphrase it. It says, to both Jeff and Katie, it looks like your persistence and completion rates are increasing in each successive cohort. We saw that in both Katie's slides as well as Jeff's. Let me start with you, Katie. What did you make changes? I mean, what was the reason for that? Can you attribute something to those changes that you saw?
I have two guesses, right? One, we got better at delivering the package to the students, so it was just a better experience, so more people persisted and felt like it was well organized. And I think a second piece is really connecting our class to other courses in our department and in other departments. I think students knowing that they're part of a pathway has really improved the persistence, and it's taken a year to really get that through our curriculum system.
How about you, Jeff? If you had to respond to that same question, what do you attribute that fairly significant increase you saw cohort to cohort?
Okay, well, a part of that is that the cohorts early on, you're just looking at more time that has elapsed, so you might get more students leaving the program. I think that's a part of it. Also, just that first cohort where we only had one graduate out of 8 students, it was just the circumstances. Several of them had to leave because they just had to move out of state, or they had family members who needed caregiving. So I think it was just maybe an anomaly, that first cohort, and hopefully the other cohorts won't have those similar problems.
I thought both Jeff and Katie were going to say it was their skill in running a bridge program that led to this increase. Actually, it probably was to a large extent. You know, we talked among our presenters that all of our students, mostly adult students, of course, do have these situations where, for conditions or circumstances beyond their control or ours, influence their ability to stay with the program. Another question that came up, let me pose this one. It's a technical question in a way. I think this would go to Rob. Rob, what did you mean when you said 1.75 FTE was reimbursable? Was that you, Rob, that said that?
This is Katie, if he doesn't pop in.
Okay, Katie, you go ahead and say it.
I think I know what he means. Right, so you have one class, right? And I think what he means is that you're paying for 1.75 of a teacher when normally you would just pay for 1.0 of a teacher. That was my interpretation.
Right. Now, Elaine, so how does this work at a college? How do you fund these things? Everyone wants to know that. You alluded to that in your comments, Elaine. How do you fund these things that are typically taking multiple teachers?
Well, we have a variety of different ways to do that, and that's part of why we're having these comments about the National Science Foundation and Department of Labor, because those certainly are ways that can fund, especially the beginning of these programs. Once we get a full enrollment and the classes pretty much pay for themselves, but your question about that extra teacher, you know, we could build arguments, and I think that we should, about the fact that these students are able to pass the gatekeeper classes. They're able to get through the system faster. It has to be looked at as a success rather than just a question of cost for that one class.
Sure, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing, I'd like to go back to that question before this on the as these courses grow and are successful, the students from the prior cohort come back and mentor the next cohort free. They're so excited about what they're doing. So now you've got a system that is built to grow, and it's built to share enthusiasm. It's person to person. These people tell each other about how much better they're doing, and then they start to study together. Even when they're not in a cohort anymore, they have built the skills to know that that's an important piece, and so it's built to grow, and I think that's something that we often miss.
That's a great point, Elaine. You know, let me follow up a question for you, and we've heard this throughout the presentation. We see it in the questions. If I start a bridge program, suppose I was that one attendee who asked about the manufacturing program. If I start a manufacturing bridge program, realistically, how long will it take me to where I can claim I'm successful? It's going to be more than one semester, I know that. What do you think? Elaine, let me start with you, and then I'll turn to Rob and see what he says to the same question. How long would it take realistically to create success in a bridge program, starting from zero?
Well, I don't think that's an answerable question. I think that you can't determine that. There are so many variables. There's, you know, if we get a big infusion of money, if we get different administrators, if we get it varies from school to school. That's why we were so excited about adapting and adopting, not just cookie cutter saying this is what we're going to do, now you take it and build it. It has to be very individualized, and we're also, the thing that we haven't spoken about as much as we probably should are the needs of the industry in the local area. And I think that's really true in manufacturing. You're going to have industry playing a role in this, and the more that happens, the more successful it will be.
Good point. Let me ask Rob Young to come back on the line. Rob, if you had to respond to that question, you've been in the program for a long time now. You got your colleague in manufacturing who asked you, hey, Rob, how long until I can achieve success if I start today? What would you say?
Yeah, good question. Sorry, I had microphone problems earlier.
Sure.
I think, you know, what you're going to find is that in that first semester, the success you'll have is having excited students. I mean, if we look at the real numbers, it might be different, but you know, I think students are really excited to be in cohorts if that's what you choose to do. They're really excited that a lot of their skills gap is being addressed, and that their instruction is concentrated just in where they need to be, which is their target goal. So I think it's successful to have excited students. Now, you need more than that, and I think in the terms of retention and success, that first semester, it's a lot of new stuff for a lot of teachers, and there's organizational elements like Elaine said. There's a lot of variables. So, like all of us, when we teach a new course and a new topic, the first semester you learn a lot that you can apply to the next time. And so, I think you're looking at least a year, at least 2 semesters to come up with to have more success. So it's a great thing to talk about, because if your administrator or someone above you says, you know, I'll let you do this for a semester, well, that's not helpful. You need a commitment to something like a year, 2 if possible, and then come back and visit data and say, okay, this worked or didn't work. Or you of course visit data periodically at every semester, but I think you'll have success in the existing semester in building excitement, like I said, but it's going to take a while to get things really right, and that's an important message to everybody.
That's a good point, Rob. One question for you. One other additional question. You talked about the IBEST model. One of our attendees says, you know, when you do these IBEST type of courses, are the cohorts capped to limit the size? You know, that can often lead to success if you have a modest sized group. Do you limit our IBEST courses, or perhaps your other bridge courses, capped in enrollment?
I imagine they are. We have caps of 30 in some of our classes because they don't run effectively above that. I don't think an IBEST course would run very well at above 30, and ideally at 20 or below. But of course, we know that the school wants to pack as many in as possible.
Sure.
But yeah, I think they need to be capped. You can't have a lecture course of 70 at an IBEST model, because a lot of individual instruction needs to happen for these type of students because their skill levels may vary.
Excellent. Let me turn to another of our panelists, Jeff. Jeff, here's a question. If you were talking to your chancellor or whoever you have there at Athens, and you wanted to tell him or her about your success, what measures do you talk about? Persistence? Do you talk about completion? What's your best measure of success that you can tell an upper administrator that will get their attention? What do you use?
I guess completion, that's the overall, that's the overarching number, you know, the number that we can graduate, because we have a high placement rate. So if our students graduate, they're most likely, well, half either go on to obtain a 4-year degree or they get jobs. So I think that's
Completion. I bet, that gets community college people attention today, so I think you're right.
And in the state of Georgia, our funding is based on completion rates, the funding for the colleges.
We're talking about that here in Arizona, but it hasn't happened yet. Thank you, Jeff. Katie, one quick question for you. You mentioned you learned a lot from your math and English faculty colleagues. Any turf issues? Were they nervous about you coming onto their turf?
Yeah, no, not at all. I really was so lucky to have an English department that had multiple people interested in working in contextualized learning, and same with the math department. I think some of these basic skills type courses are frustrating to the faculty in that students don't always know what's the point, why do I have to take an English class, why do I have to take a math class, and so they were very excited to both share with their students in their class how students can use these skills, and both of my faculty colleagues were very excited when I asked, how do you do that? I want to do it the same way in my class. And I think that was a really good feeling all around.
That's good. Thanks, Katie. Elaine, we're going to give you the last chance to say something. If those of you looking at the clock will realize we are so perfectly on time, let me do our last two slides here, well, sort of like a little commercial. Join us on January 21st for Leveraging Grants to Achieve Mutual Goals. You could subtext this, what do you do when your tech money starts to run out? That's not exactly right, but I'm just sort of saying that tongue-in-cheek. It's being presented by Dr. Celeste Carter, who's the head of the ATE program at the National Science Foundation. So I think all of you, including me, will find that interesting. Here's some contact information. Those of you that will be getting these slides will have this at your leisure. As we go into our very final slide, Elaine, what would you say if someone comes to you and say, gee, I'm really thinking about starting a course. I'm not sure where to start. Should I do it? What advice would you give? I think you've told me that you think it's really worth it. Well, how would you convince someone right at the beginning to do this? What's your final word? Yeah.
I guess that question really should go to the people that have started them, but the invitation to be part of a group, and I guess that's why I started with the communities of practice, because some people feel so alone. We've, when we first started biotech programs in general, there were people in different parts of the country, and each one it was usually a single person, and they felt so isolated. And coming together, we have been able to support each other over the years, and I think that's true with starting a bridge as well. People they feel alone in starting these new programs, and to share what we've been sharing today and to know that there are people that are willing to help and to talk and to share their materials, I think that's the bottom line.
That's a great bottom line and a great wrap up to this webinar, Elaine. Elaine, thank you for inviting your colleagues, your co-presenters, and my compliments to Jeff and Katie and Rob. Really appreciate what you've done today, and also working in the background. Many of you know John Carise. He was very important at pulling this webinar together. That officially concludes our webinar for today on Bridge Learning Communities. Thanks everyone for joining, and presenters, just go ahead and click mute on your phones. Goodbye everyone.